Okay, so this is going to be a video on how to build the upper section of the tapered hood, the common tapered hood that we do. So the first thing I do is take an 8-foot sheet and cross cut some pieces out of it. So what I do is I cross cut 2 pieces of 31. So these are 31 by roughly 48. I true up all 4 sides. And then out of that same sheet, I get this 18 and 11/16 by 48. And this is going to be for the hood vent cutout. So first thing I do is I finish blanking this out, and that's going to be found on the paperwork. So it's roughly 40.5 by 18 and 11/16, and that's what I blank it out to. And then after the lower section is assembled, the custom guy can check that fit and make sure it's good before he cuts out the vent cutout. So I'll go ahead and get that cut out. Okay, so we've got our lower vent cut out. So we label it hood vent, the job name and the color. And I've just blanked this out based right off of the instruction sheet here. And that's as far as I take it, and then the custom guy will cut out the vent insert, and that information is also found on the floor plans, the insert size cutout. So next what we'll do is we'll work on getting the saw all set up to cut out these upper sections. So there's one upper section here, and then 2 side pieces, and then the drop, the braces in the back, and I cut all them out at the same time along with these wedges here. So let's go through that process real quick. So let me just re-emphasize what you need to do. So before you do anything else with the saw, you need to have 2 pieces that are 31 by about 48, and they need to be clean edges all the way around. And then you'll need 2 pieces of drop that's 6 inches by 48, and they don't need to have clean edges, but it's always nice to have clean edges on at least the long sides. Okay, so the first thing we need to do on this upper section is we need to cut this 10-degree bevel on the bottom edge. So I do that very first. So on the slide saw here, if I can zoom in here, you can see 10-degree bevel right there. So I slide this over and I set this stop right there to that pencil mark that says 10 degree, and that's roughly 29 and 15/16 is where that's at. And then we set our saw to 10 degrees. So right down here we've got our 45, so we're going to crank that over till it reads 10 degrees. And once that reads 10 degrees, we lock that down. And then what you're going to do is we're going to be beveling the long side of this on both these pieces. So we'll go ahead and get those beveled, and then we'll come back and show you the rest. Okay, so we've got these beveled. So I've got the beveled edge facing me when I'm at the saw. As soon as I get them beveled, what I do is I take my pencil mark, and this one's kind of a bad example, but I basically kind of draw a beveled line on there so I know which way I'm going to be taper cutting this upper section of the hood. And then on one of them, I'll draw a line down the middle so that I make sure that one of them is going to be the 2 side halves and the other one is going to be the front. That's just kind of a quick reference so that I make sure that I don't miscut them later on. So once I get them to this point, I usually leave one on this side of the table, and then the other one I stick over on the sheet good bunk, and that way they're off the saw so that I can set it up to do this tapered cut at a 44-degree angle. So let me move this out of the way, and then we'll get the saw all set up. Okay, so once you get those pieces blanked out to that, then we're going to start changing the saw setup. So the first thing we're going to want to do is move this cross piece by loosening this nut underneath here, and the same on the other side. We're going to loosen that, and then we're going to move that bar to this front hole location. And so it'll say first right here. That's going to be your first cut. So this is our first cut setup. So we're going to go into the first cut mark there, and then on this slide arm right here, we're going to put it in this hole right here that lines up with the first cut. So there's a little first cut right there. Now the other thing to remember is this upper section is a 30-inch hood. So over here on our plans, the upper section is 30 inches tall. So we set our saw at 10 degrees and it's at 29 and 15/16, and that gives us a 30-inch cut. Now, if it's a 42-inch hood, you can see it right here, 42-inch hood, and over here, 30-inch hood. So underneath, you've got this triangle swing arm. Right now, it's set for 30-inch hood. It's lined up. If I was to loosen this nut here and swing that around on this pivot point over to the other side and tighten it up, you'll see on the back side here it's labeled 42-inch hood. So that changes the distance of this pivot arm that swings with the machine. So if you're doing a 42-inch hood, it's important that you loosen this up and swing that around so that it gives you the length of cut you need. So let me go ahead and get this fence moved over, and I'll show you what settings we've got it from there. Okay, so now you can see that I've got this front arm here, this front bar in this front hole. I haven't cranked it down yet. I've just got it in there. I usually will just get it kind of started. I won't tighten it all the way down yet. Then on the other one, there's a pin that goes in the hole here, and that pin will slide. You can slide that over until it drops down into that hole there that's labeled with the first cut. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to slide this arm, and when you do that, it changes the angle of that bar. So we're going to want to set that up. Right here there's a scale. There's a line with an X. You want the bar to sit over the X, and you want it lined up on 10 degrees. So up here we've got this labeled 10 degrees right here, and we match the 10 degree down below. So this front section has a taper of 10 degrees. So that's what we're setting it at. The other thing that we're going to want to do is we're going to move this whole front fence back on this track all the way back here to where it says hood 32 and 42. So to do that, you're going to loosen up this front arm right here, and then you'll be able to slide this whole fence back. Okay, so you can see that that's been moved back, so it gives us more of the sled up front, and that's going to give us our motion that we need. In order to cut on this angle, we've got to have enough room between the fence and the blade. Without moving that back, you'll run into a problem, and that's why on the upper 42-inch hood, you've got to swing that so it gives us a little bit longer pivot point on this lower arm. Okay, so we're going to set this up to 10 degrees here. So you can see when you slide it, you can get to that 10 degree mark. So I've got a pencil mark there that kind of shows which line is the 10 degree, and that helps a little bit to get it lined up. And then next thing you want to do is you want to make sure that this fence isn't sticking out past the blade. So underneath here there's a positive stop, so you can just slide it all the way over until it bottoms out. Once that slides over and bottoms out and you're on your 10 degree mark, you can tighten up this nut here that locks down the fence, and then you're going to want to tighten up this nut here and the one in the front here, and that keeps this slide locked from moving forward and backwards to change your angles. Okay, so we've got the fence all locked down. So we've got this lower arm tightened up. We've got the lockdowns on the slide arm locked. And we've got our fence here set at 10 degrees. Now, up here on your paperwork, you can see here the angle is 44.5 degrees. So that's going to be the angle of the blade. So we're going to come right down here to the angle of the blade, and we're going to set that to 44.5 degrees. Okay, then we'll lock that in. So now that's got our angle of the blade at 44.5 degrees. Now you'll want to check your height, your blade height. We want to come up just a little bit. So we're going to raise that up a little bit. Okay, and now we're ready to make our first couple of passes. So our first couple of passes, we're going to have our material on the front side of the fence to cut those. And you're going to want the beveled edge, that 10-degree beveled edge, against the fence. So let me get one in position, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so we have our first board in position. The first one I usually cut is the one that's on the saw. After I cut it, I slide it back over on the side of the saw, and then I grab the piece off the bunk and cut it, and then slide it back on the bunk to set up for our next passes. So basically on these first two passes, you're just going to be taking the minimal amount off both pieces. So you're just cutting the right side of the front piece, and then you're cutting the right side of the piece that'll be the two side pieces. So on these, it's sometimes hard to know where it needs to be to cut off the minimal amount. So on this block of wood here, it says hood upper 1.25 inch first cut. So basically what that means is you want to set it up so that you're 1.25 inches past that wood block like that. And that's going to give you, your cut is going to come right up to the end, so you're maximizing your piece. So on this cut, on this board, and the exact same cut on the other board, you just want to go 1.25 inches past and cut off as minimal as you can. Okay, so as you can see, I've done two cuts. So my second one I've cut and my first one I've cut. So I've got these two drop pieces here. Now these are just tapered drop pieces that I've cut off the end of the board here. One thing that I failed to mention was sometimes this block of wood will get twisted one way or the other, and it won't line up with the metal very good. It's undersized a little bit, so you can see how there's a little bit of a gap between the wood and the work piece. That's fine. If this wood piece was kicking out too far and it was kicking your piece out like that, holding your piece away, you would want to tap it back to where you're tight to the metal fence. That's the important part. So now we've got these two drop pieces. So now these pieces are going to be our wedges. So we set these aside, and the custom guy will square up the other side and make the wedge pieces out of them. Okay, so I've got my first piece back up here on the saw, and it's just on the right side that's been beveled. And then I've got my other piece here. This is going to be the two side pieces, and I've got it beveled on the one side also. So now we need to set up the saw for our second cut. So on our second cut, I don't have it labeled, but the first cut, you go in this front hole. In the second cut, you go back up here to this hole with your bar, and then on the slide arm, it's labeled right here second. Now you don't have to move this slide arm at all. It can stay locked. So all you need to do is loosen up this front, lift the whole bar out, put it in here, put that pin back in this second hole here that's labeled second. Make sure that the bar is slid back to the stop point so it clears the cut, the knife, and tighten it all down. Okay, so now we've got this front bar in this front hole location and tightened down. You can see it's set on our 10 degree mark, and I don't adjust it at all. All I do is make sure that pin is in this second hole and don't move this slide bar at all, and it'll put you right in the 10 degree. So next, on our fence here, you can see where it says 42-inch hood, second cut upper. So that's going to be our stop position. And you'll have to go off the pencil mark. Which is about 41 1/4. But I try to, if the pencil starts to wear off, I actually try to, as I set it, I will re-pencil it. So just make sure that you've got a nice sharp pencil if you're going to remark it. And you can remark it as time needs, as it gets worn off. Okay, so that's going to be our second cut on our upper part. So we've got this one here. It doesn't have the line in the middle, so we know this is going to be the front piece. So what we'll do is we, again, put our 10 degree bevel against the fence. Okay, so we've got our 10 degree bevel against the fence. You can see that the line that we drew is parallel with the sled table, so we know that that's set at the right taper. So again, we just bring it back. On this one, we're going to use the stop. So we're going to slide it over and set our stop. It doesn't necessarily matter if you do the side ones or the front one first. I usually will do the front one first so that I can, after I cut it, I can just move it all the way off the saw and put it over in the custom area so it's out of the way. So you just want to slide it over. You don't want to crush the miter. You just want to touch it up to it and cut that through, and then we'll cut the side pieces. Okay, so we've cut our front piece. So the drop from that is a little bit wider. Now we're going to use that, so we're going to set it aside and hang on to that. Then our side piece ones, again, we only want to set it 1 1/4 inch on here so that when we cut it, it's just taking off a little bit, because this piece, we need to get 2 21 pieces out of it by cutting it down the middle. So we want to maximize this front piece as wide as we can. Okay, so now that we've got our front piece and our 2 side pieces beveled, we don't want to change the saw setup quite yet. So you remember these 2 pieces that we set aside here that are 6 inches by 48. So what we want to do is we want to cut, sorry about all the movement, but we want to cut these braces, and they also need to be taper cut to match the taper that we just cut on the hood. Now they don't need to be cut at a 44.5 degree, so we're going to square the blade up, but we're going to leave the fence set up exactly how it is. Okay, so with our fence all squared up, we're going to take these 2 pieces, we're going to set them up here. We're just going to take a little bit off each one on the one end, and then we'll flip one of them over, and on here you've got 42-inch brace, long point, 40 3/8 in the little pencil mark. So after we cut the one side, we're going to flip it over and put the long point against here and cut one. Then the other one on the back side here, there's a mark there that says hood brace, short point to short point. So I'll show you that, how we cut that short point to short point and long point to long point. Okay, so I've just made the first cut, and I've just shaved a little bit off of these Let me move these out of the way. So I've just shaved a little bit off of these. So the first one, I'm gonna flip over. Now you want to make sure that you're putting the long point to that pencil mark. So you can see how the bevel comes this way towards you, and then again on the saw, the bevel's coming in towards you, and that's going to give your long point measurement against your stop block. Okay, so this was our drop piece. So we've cut our piece long point to long point at 40 3/8. Now we're going to cut the other one short point to short point. So to do that, you're going to put it in front of. So now the first one we cut on the back side of our bar towards us. Now the other one we're going to put on the front side of our push bar here. So on this one, you can see that we're on our short point on our stop, and over here our saw is going to be cutting in so that it's going to be off the short point and not off the long point. So again, we just slide this in place to where we're on the pencil mark there to our short point, and we'll run it through, and that's going to end up being about 30 3/8 short point to short point. Okay, so now you can see that those have been beveled to match the upper part of the hood. So the next process for these is to put a couple of pockets on both ends so that they can brace the hood. And then we still need to put our saw back to where it was originally, putting this crossbar in the front hole where it is already, and then putting it back in this back hole and tightening that up, and then moving our entire sled back up on the sled there, our whole fence back up on the sled to where it's flush on the back side. Okay, so now with our fence slid back up to the end of our table here, make sure that this fence gets slid all the way over. Slide it all the way over until it bottoms out before you tighten up the underside clamp. Make sure you tighten that one and that one. If you don't slide the fence over, it's going to throw off your scale because that's based off this stop point underneath here. So make sure that gets slid over and bottomed out when you tighten up the underside clamp. So once you're in that position, set your stop here to 21. Set your other fence also to 21. And now we'll be ready to split this one in half to get our two side pieces. Okay, so now we're ready to cut our two side pieces. You want to make sure that you've got your 10-degree beveled part against your fence. You want to be sure not to slam it over into the stop. You just want to go over and touch it. If you go too hard, you're going to break the corner of that 45, and then it's going to give you a false reading. So you just want to touch it in to the stop on that side, and then use this other stop to cut your other side. Okay, so we've run our two pieces at 21 inches. So now we've got one side piece there, one side piece here. So what I do is I'll flip it over, put it on top of the other one, and I'll just double check, make sure that it's cutting at 21. Both sides are at 21. If they're not, what I'll do is I'll loosen up these two nuts, make sure that fence is over far enough, make sure there's nothing in there, blow it out if I need to. And then if it is cutting exact, then I know that this scale is correct. If it's off a little bit and I've moved this back and I know that that's all the way back over and it's still off a little bit with these two pieces, then I'll cut the one down to match the other one. So I might have to take maybe a 16th off of one. It ends up being like 20 and 15/16. That's fine. more importantly, I know that this scale is not matching my other scale, and I can calibrate this scale if need be. Then we've got our drop piece here from cutting our 2 in the middle, so we're going to use this. So we need 2 skid pieces. So once they build this, they put 2 skids underneath here. So I make the skids out of this drop piece from splitting the 2, and this bigger piece out of the wedge, the upper part, when I cut that. So what I do is I just measure this width and I rip the other one to match, and then I cut it to about 20 7/8 long, so it's a little bit shorter than the depth of the upper part of the hood. Okay, so I've got these 2 pieces cut. These are the 2 skid pieces. I intentionally leave this beveled part on there. I don't think they need it to pry the pieces off. But if you nail them on there right, it creates a little bit of a lip where you can hook a hammer on it and pull them off. Whether they get mounted that way or not, I don't know, but I usually leave that beveled edge on there. So that's pretty much all we do on cutting the upper parts out. The most important thing is just make sure that the fence is back where it needs to be, and that all the lockdown adjustments are all tightened up. Sometimes these will get left loose, and then this fence gets jarred around. So that's why I kind of always double check it with these side pieces, cutting one on one side and one on the other. So at least at 21 inches, I know that the fences are cutting equal. Okay, so I've got these 2 side pieces tipped up, and you can see that set at 21, cutting one on each side. They're pretty close to being exact. So it's off just a little bit. So this scale is cutting just a little bit off. So I'm going to calibrate that and readjust that to where they're both cutting exactly at 21. Okay, so just a quick recap. So we cut out our front piece and our 2 side pieces and our braces, and we've also cut out the wedges for the upper section in this video. The previous video we did the lower section, so make sure you check that out if you're doing the lower section. And again, this is just the standard tapered hood for Brio.